According to that, I am live. Mic is working. Camera screen capturing. I had to adjust some things. Sorry, I was a bit last minute. Yeah, I've been working on the weekend. I was actually also, I admit, just before this, I was watching season 1 of The Expanse. I don't know if any of you are watching The Expanse, but I'm quite enjoying season 5. But it made me realize that I actually needed to go back and remember like why a lot of the stuff is happening in it. So I started watching season 1 again, and I must say I'm actually quite enjoying it. I really don't remember very much of it at all. So yeah, to me that's the best thing that's on, like, that I can watch at the moment. I still really want to watch Silicon Valley season 6, but it's not available in Japan, at least not on any service that I have. Season 1 to 5 was available on Amazon, and I quite enjoyed that, so I wanted to see 6, but can't find it. But yes, hopefully you can see this. I see people are not sure. Let's see who's in the comments. Thank you, everyone, especially Andrew Moboy late at night. More drama, tennis-related drama in Australia, but good to see you. Who else have we got? We've got Quinn Rankett. Excellent to have you in the chat as always. We've got, oh, what just happened there? That is odd. I've just had my screen capture crash. Let me try that again. That is unusual. Is that a Wi-Fi problem? Yes, so I'm going to reboot the screen capture app. Sorry about that. While I get the capture rebooted, yeah, good to see TechArt too. Good morning indeed. We've got, who else? Andrew Moboy, yes, the boom has now arrived. Mr. Cordy Chap, excellent to see you as always. We've got the King of Kanto. What up, Kings, indeed, good to see you. Barry Convex, hello, good to see you. There was another technical difficulty, again, indeed it is a feature of the show, not a bug, and there we go, it should be back now. Boom, 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 there we go. So we have capture back. Remember, as always, if you are if you're watching the show, I always love it when people just say hello. It's just nice to see the names. I will try to say hello if you're there. If you have a question for me or a topic you'd like me to talk about, just at Mark Eco Simon, and I will normally catch it that way. It'll flash orange, as you'll be able to see. It's a little trick you can do. You just have to spell the username correctly. It's the same as the channel. And I guess it's kind of funny. I didn't think that there was a lot of news this week, but yeah, as I was going through, there were a fair few topics to pick up, so that was good. Maybe I should shout out to congrats to I saw Alicia was pinging on Twitter and so on that her English, was it English Pod 101? I think they've got like 5 million subscribers now. It's kind of crazy. But yes, I'm quite happy slowly losing subscribers as I am. Man, is that crashed again? What is up with that? I swear this doesn't normally happen. Wow, it's amazing how there's something new every time. That is definitely crashing as well. Why would that be crashing? Oh, that's so frustrating. I'm going to try that one more time. So assuming that the other app crashed, I'm going to reboot it. What is the latest discussion on the Tokyo Olympics? Well, that is one of the things that I have in there. Still full steam ahead, at least by everybody talking about the subject, which is ridiculous. But yes, everybody's still gung-ho about it happening. I swear this doesn't normally happen. Let's see, there it is. Should be back again. So I have no idea what's going on with that, but yes, the capture is now working again. Mr. Cordy Chip just put cheese on your crackers. I'm glad. Enjoying that. Yeah, so the Olympics is the plan is for it still to happen. Although right now, as we'll talk about, Japan is definitely going through a bad patch with the virus, and frankly, people's motivation to really comply with the state of emergency seems to be now pretty low, and it's really running ahead faster than it's ever run before. So yeah, we'll see. It's hard to see right now how they'll be able to do it, or even why they should do it. Even having the sumo tournament that they've been having. 65 wrestlers, I believe, are either not attending because they're afraid. Some of them even quit because they said that they were afraid. Some of them have it, including the grand champion, the Yokozuna Hakuho. So, that's just for the sumo. I would love. The only thing I appreciate about the Olympics is that it is a goal. It presents a goal for the government to get everybody in the whole country virus free by July. So it's good. If they're aiming for that, then they have to get everyone vaccinated. They have to do lockdowns and so on. If they can achieve that, that's great. I don't see how they're going to do it, but if they can, it's good to have a goal. So I appreciate that. We've got Sergeant Bilko. Excellent to see you, and everybody else. Remember, say hello if you're joining. Let's dive into the topics. I talk about this a bit, but it keeps coming up in the news. This is not me. There's actually multiple stories every week. About the hydrogen race, and yeah, it is fascinating. Basically, the Japanese government, America isn't going down this rabbit hole because it takes government commitment to changing the infrastructure, and America just isn't big on infrastructure, roads, power lines, filling in potholes. It doesn't seem to do that sort of thing. Japan's been sort of preparing for this for a while, and they're helping their oil suppliers. And hydrocarbon suppliers in Australia and Brunei and places like that prepare for this. And this is a thing that you can make it, you can put it on the ships, and you can bring it to Japan, and you can distribute it using the existing gasoline infrastructure. But also, what's really cool, that's technically grey or blue. Actually, that's grey if you don't capture the carbon, and blue if you manage to capture the carbon when you convert it from like petroleum. But what's really exciting is a green hydrogen. That's the idea that basically you just run you use electrolysis to basically extract hydrogen out of water, out of seawater, out of a stream, just any water that's around, which is great for Japan because you don't need to have sort of massive power stations or anything like that. You could do it just basically you could actually create hydrogen locally beside every petrol station. So that's what they're aiming for, and EU sort of cottoned on that this is a good idea as well. What I like about it is that it addresses both the problems of the thing about charging batteries is you don't know where the electricity came from that charged the batteries. Whereas if everything's running on hydrogen, you're actually guaranteed, especially if it's green hydrogen, if it's generated from directly from non-carbon generating sources, then you've actually got completely green energy. So it's kind of exciting to see this is actually happening. We'll still have to wait and see, but the fuel cell cars in Japan, there aren't that many of them, but it's exciting to see that as an area which is growing. Andrea Molboy says Australian Open is still happening even if some players cannot train for 2 weeks. That's about 50 players. Yeah, that's kind of weird to me. That I get it that they are locking down the players, but they're not even allowing them to train. They're forcing them to stay inside rooms. Seems a little bit extreme. I think when they had a rugby tournament in Australia, they actually forced, including a New Zealand team, to go over to Australia, and they had to isolate, or they had to keep to a bubble of their team, and in a certain area, and firewall who they were interacting with. But they were able to train during that time. I must admit, for players as well as people going to watch, the idea of people coming halfway around the world and basically being in prison for 2 weeks seems to kind of suck to me. And it's all it's interesting. At least it's informing the kind of risk that Japan's taking with the Olympics. So that is an interesting thing. Who is Mr. CC2? Why has he breached quarantine? I have no idea. It is funny, the collective outrage thing in Australia. The thing is, when the numbers are small, it is enough. It was like this in Japan too, when there were only 20 cases. There was a big thing. Yamanashi Prefecture, when a university student had a barbecue and gave 4 other people this, and then did other irresponsible things. She, people doxed her. Government officials released her personal information, and she was harassed. And this happened in Queensland as well, where my mum is. And I heard about this in Australia. When the numbers are small, it's enough that you can have vigilantes, get self-righteous and actually start to target the people who have it. But when the numbers get as they are right now, to like 2,500 people a day in Tokyo, 7,000 people a day this week in Japan, they're actually even giving up properly contact tracing anymore, and they're only just focusing on trying to isolate elderly and particularly vulnerable people. So those sort of frameworks don't hold up, and in some ways it's a positive when it detracts from the sort of lynch mob mentality that assembles around some of the people that have it. But yes, close contacts, and the CMO changed the rules at the last minute. Now they're hitting some tennis balls against hotel walls and mattresses. That's pretty badly run. So there you go. Butter, lots of butter. Yes. Well, if they locked me up with bread and butter, I'd probably be good. Odie Jr., boom, excellent to have you here in the chat. This by the way, there's this picture coming from a country with a lot of agriculture. The caption is 8 things that people realized were pointless about Japanese work culture. I don't know. 2 ways I can interpret this. That gesture was made by Carlos Spencer when he was playing for Auckland against the Canterbury, Auckland's arch rival rugby team. We went to the crowd. The crowd there is always like they hate Auckland. And when this person scored an outrageous try to win a game at the last minute, and sort of people still talk about how arrogant he turned to the crowd and he gave that gesture. And it was the best try I've ever seen, and I'm an Auckland fan, so to do that there and then do that was awesome. But you know what, it also kind of looks like a veterinary procedure. Like if you've seen when I was a kid in New Zealand and Australia, there's a show called Country Practice. It's a British show about a country vet, and he did that a lot, with cows and stuff like that. I have no idea why that's a photo in a workplace, and it's probably inappropriate, but that was funny. But in terms of surveys showing obvious things that were pointless that for some reason they didn't notice before. Sergeant Bilko, yes, test is definitely working there. Let me put this back. Christian Hugo, the hydrogen infrastructure is very different. Building incredibly expensive infrastructure to turn electricity into hydrogen to get back to electricity is not logical. Well, it's more logical than burning coal or whatever that we're doing now. And remember, this is primarily for fuel cells for cars. So right now, it just makes the electricity more portable. I think it still makes sense. The problem you have with renewable energy right now is the inability to store it. When you basically, if you've got it going charging during the day and you can't use it at night, there's ways to do it. You can create enormous dams that are incredibly destructive for pumped hydro, which is the way to do it. But batteries are dirty. Batteries are not a good way to do it. No, hydrogen is a good, clean way to store energy. It makes complete sense. In fact, it's a form of natural battery. And it's got the advantages of gasoline in terms of portability and density, and it's that gasoline has over electric batteries, and it's got the advantages of electric batteries. To me, it makes a lot of sense. And not as the sole thing to invest in, but for definitely for things like cars, for things like backup power storage and stuff like that, it makes a ton of sense actually. But anyway, Henry Morbe, are Teslas becoming popular in Japan? Yeah, there are definitely Tesla fans. There are people on YouTube, including JJ Walsh, and the other guy in Osaka. Oh, I forget his handle name. But yeah, there are Tesla owners on Twitter and YouTube and so on. They're like probably owning any exotic foreign car. I'd worry about the servicing and stuff like that. They're not, but they do have charging stations, and yeah, I wouldn't say that they're popular. I see them around where I live, so yeah, they're not as big as like in America, but they're doing pretty well. And that's a good thing. JMac 217, yo, indeed, good to see you and all the other people rocking in. Please do remember to say hello. Bread, butter, and cheese, yes. Anyway, back into this. So 8 things that people noticed were dumb about the way that they worked. In fact, I think that is it. 8 things people realize were pointless about Japanese work culture. Number 8, chit-chatting with co-workers. I suppose it kind of wasted more time, but I kind of missed that myself. But anyway, visiting clients' offices, 13%. Business trips, 14%. Not really a part of my stuff. Although I must admit, one thing I don't like about visiting client offices, especially the advantage of doing a teleconference call when you're all bought into doing it, is, for a 1-hour meeting, you've often got more than an hour to get there and an hour to get back. It's like 3.5 hours commitment for a 1-hour meeting. It's always nicer when you can do a video conference, and I appreciate that. My office. It's funny, I miss having an office, but I guess people thought that was silly. Paper documents. Again, I'm not sure. I bought a printer as soon as I don't know about, did anyone else buy a printer for lockdown? I did not. I need it for my job where I have to read documents carefully quite a lot. I don't use it for everything, but I do use it pretty often. But certainly people wastefully printing a lot of stuff, and the amount of paper that you generate is, it's good to be aware of that. Hanko seals, definitely something that was a big topic that everyone realized was pointless. And the fact that so many companies have lots of routine operations, like, asking to expense something or take time off, or permission to, go and see the doctor for half a day because you're not feeling well in the middle of the day, and it all requiring a hanko to be able to do. The idea that being that now you have to go into office and physically, meet the boss to do that, and that just for these seal-based processes, these personal seals, that it was stopping companies from having work from home. That was shown up in a big way and was a big topic, so that's definitely a thing. Work-related drinking parties, 31%. It is funny, these are a lot less of a thing now than they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I mean, even being unable to drink, like medically unable to drink, you were still forced to drink. And it was almost like a hazing culture around work-related drinking parties. And that culture really shifted noticeably about 15 years ago, where, you'd still have the office parties, but it became a big thing to promote consideration towards people who don't drink, for example, like getting a picture of tea as well as a picture of beer or whatever, and people being able to choose. That was really about 2005. That's really when the mandatory drinking and mandatory karaoke parties finished. I'm sure some companies still have that. But 31%, I guess people still feel that pressure. I guess, if you want to be sociable and go up and earn trust within your company and whatever, that's still what people do. I really don't do it at all, actually, which is probably to my own detriment. But people realizing that they don't have to say it is a good thing. And time spent commuting. I really feel this one. This one I feel the most as well. This is definitely number one for me. I don't consider that my commute is particularly bad. But 1 hour, I mean, even if you're driving, for me it's on the train, and the train is infinitely, I think, probably more comfortable than driving. But 1 hour spent on the train going to work, then working for X number of hours trying to get as much done as possible, then needing to come home and, often getting dinner on the way home, spending more than an hour. That's time which now I spend, the time that I normally leave the house to go and get on the train is the time I start working, which is kind of sad in a way, but it's 2 extra hours of work, which I would feel the pressure of losing if I was in the office. I must admit, now, it took me a long time to get used to working here. But I don't know how other people feel, but I must admit, I'm very fortunate I can work remotely, but I must admit, I feel like I would get less done now if I went into the office in some ways. The chance to collaborate is great, and I miss that, but at the end of the day, I think I'd get more done in the day. Before dinner, anyway. At dinner, you want to eat, it breaks up everything. It's hard to work past that. You have to pick up work again after. But before dinner, I think you get a lot more done. So I definitely feel that. So, probably not just Japanese. Well, maybe the seals and stuff like that, or the veterinary science discussions in the photo there. I'm not sure. But, that's what I'm feeling. Andrew Moboy definitely saying, yep, there. How would office dinners, parties, lunches work now with COVID? Well, where I am, what we do is, occasionally, we haven't done it a lot, but some teams, if you're on a small team, they are agreeing to meet up and just have like a small 4 or 5 person lunch. But even that's hard right now. What I've done a couple of times is we have done a teleconference, like a Zoom lunch, where we're all on video. We all buy lunch, we all expense it, the company will pay for it, and you can actually do that pretty well. It's even better in some ways that you can actually each order what you want. I got myself some Vietnamese food for one. I got to try out Uber Eats, and that was pretty good. So there's definitely ways to do it. So actually, you don't have to compromise for the menu. You don't have to. So I find that's pretty good. Quentin Rankin, fewer interruptions working at home. Yeah, yes and no. I guess not, actually. I guess that's what I've gotten used to. I think we do have to message. Again, I'm working in an office where we all have messaging software and stuff like that. We use that. But at the same time, it is easier to say, to schedule, hey, if you need to talk and it's going to take more than 20, 30 minutes, can we schedule it for later today, and putting it on, scheduling the conversations. I am finding fewer interruptions, but I'm scheduling a lot more conversations, and sometimes, some days, my whole day is just scheduled and I don't get to do regular work. Or it's very hard. I'm doing it like before the start of the day and the end of the day, which I guess can happen anyway. But you don't have that kind of walk-up interruption, which can be a good thing. But yeah, I think less of that. I've got more control over my time, I think. Wagyu beef lunch, indeed. Well, that's exactly the sort of thing, that you can do. Actually had a lovely French roast lamb the other night for 2,000 yen. It was really good. It was actually the first proper restaurant food I guess I've had. I mean, even the Vietnamese I had, well, that was kind of proper restaurant, but it was I had banh mi. It was for lunch. But I had the first proper restaurant sort of dinner that I've had, I think, since March the other day. Now I realize how I've lost 12 kilograms. It's that I haven't been eating food like that. If I was having access to food like that regularly, I'd still be 87 kilos. So yeah, vote JJ. Nice to see the handle name, and good to have you in the chat. Apologies if this has been discussed a lot, but how have foreigners teaching English in Japan been affected by the events of 2020? Good question. I don't know. If there's anyone who does know in the comments, definitely share. I suppose, I'm guessing, one good thing about English is that it is something that you can do online or via Zoom or something like that. It's nice to do in person. I assume a lot of people have switched to online teaching, but I am not sure. I'm interested. Yeah, people, any feedback for Vote JJ on what's been happening with that? I'm not sure how they've been affected. I know that with, for example, if you're teaching in schools, when they had the schools being closed down in the beginning, that was troublesome and affected. But in terms of private schools and stuff like that, I don't know how that's really affected things. I think a lot of them have just adapted to online teaching. So yeah, this is a thing that's been increasing in the news lately. In the beginning of the pandemic, there were cases of people that had coronavirus but were being denied entry to hospitals. There was this huge discrimination thing. Now there's more of a thing happening, particularly around Tokyo, where hospitals themselves are so full, or their resources are taken up anyway, dealing with coronavirus patients, that people with other emergencies are being rejected by ambulances. So ambulances are driving around looking for hospitals that will accept people. And there have been a couple of cases now where, for example, there was a case where I think 11-year-old who had been in a car accident, had been hit by a car, was in an ambulance for an hour and a half, got turned down by 10 hospitals and died in the ambulance. Another couple of cases of elderly people and so on, and emergency calls, not being able to find a hospital that could take them. These are among the signs now that the medical system in Japan, in Tokyo in particular, is now hitting its capacity. It's another reason, if there's while people are, as I'll go into a bit later on, that even if I think everybody's gotten a little bit more comfortable, even with all the pandemic numbers, going out and going out during the day and so on, and seeing friends and not locking themselves up at home as much as they were doing before. But the danger of that is that if you get it now, and if you get seriously sick, there's actually a increasingly high chance that you won't be able to get treated for it. You won't be able to get into a hospital with a respirator and caregivers. And if you are above average weight, if you're in any high risk category, if you're over 40 years old, or if you are overweight in Japan, or if you have a condition which could add to it, like asthma or diabetes or something like that, that could require you to be under observation when you have this, you might not get that care right now. So that's the risk that you're taking when you're going out. Of course, in addition to the risk of getting it without symptoms but passing it on to other people, when the medical system is now really not able to deal with the number of people coming through this. They're trying to figure out how to deal with that, and this is why we have the state of emergency, but it's not really working very well so far. So this is the risk that you now take. Quinn Rankard, is there a single resource the ambulance drivers use to find a bed for the patient, or do they have to ask each hospital individually? As I understand, they have to contact each hospital individually. It's kind of funny. Japan is quasi-socialized healthcare in terms of everybody has in government, there's health insurance and whatever. It is a kind of a publicly guaranteed or publicly funded health system, and it is managed, but each hospital operates independently, sort of as a business. And yeah, they basically, as I understand, there's not a centralized way. There are some cases, like particularly with coronavirus now, where they are saying, okay, all coronavirus patients go to that hospital, and this is hospital number 1, and this is hospital number 2. But things like traffic accidents, or a couple of cases are coming up now where, for example, people going for scheduled cesarean births have had their cesareans cancelled because the hospitals don't have the capacity to do the elective surgeries. So they've lost not only their cesarean appointment, but actually the hospital that they were planning to go and give birth, and a couple of weeks out, and they can't find new hospitals. There's a lot of news stories coming out where this is really the medical system in Japan is very much based on people use hospitals a lot, but they do it for regular checkups, and for that they schedule ahead and plan treatments and so on. So this is where it's really not set up very well for dealing with the kind of surge of emergency care that it's now dealing with. And it is starting to cause things to break down. So, it's a concern. Black Tango, maybe they can take patients out to other prefectures. That's what I've been thinking. There was a big prejudice against that in the start of the year. There are Yamanashi and Shizuoka prefectures were talking about, picketing and blockading hospitals that were willing to take coronavirus patients from Tokyo. But now everybody's got it. That seems to be less of a stigma. But it's a problem, and they're going to have to figure something like that out. It's not clear what they're going to do right now. In terms of, as I just mentioned before, this graph represents for different areas. For Omiya, the head of sort of main city in Saitama at the top, Yokohama, Tokyo, and Chiba. The blue number represents, since the start of the state of emergency, the number of people out and about in the center of Omiya. And this is the number of people out and about in central Tokyo. Compared to last month, everyone's supposed to be staying at home, and numbers are down 38% of people going out and about in central Tokyo, 30% Omiya, 38% in Yokohama. However, that number down the bottom, the number of people out and about compared to the first state of emergency back in April or May, 138%, 172%, central Tokyo 135%, i.e. people are not taking the new state of emergency as seriously as before. People are still going out to work, they're going about their business. So and I get it, there's kind of fatigue, especially, and it's hard to take seriously the government saying to stay home, when what the government has been doing at the same time is promoting tourism, promoting going out to restaurants, and themselves. So many government political party dinners that keep getting shown up of people going out there, they're flooding the rules themselves. And the government was actually, sort of dead against. They were criticizing Tokyo for asking for a state of emergency. So that you got this problem with the central government really undermining its own efforts to sort of bring this under control by basically messaging against. I mean, not quite Trumpian, but sort of similar, where they're sort of undermining, say, people doing what they should do, and emphasizing after all of that it's the responsibility of people to decide themselves, and people are just fatigued, and they're going out more, and even me, I'm staying at home. But I remember being nervous. Should I even go to the convenience store? Should I go to the supermarket? I don't hesitate any of those choices right now, although I'm certainly still not going to crowded areas or into work, but that's because I'm able to do that. So the state of emergency definitely does not feel like a state of emergency, anything like the first one did. It's definitely still crowded, and people are not taking it as seriously. However, there was a question from Andrea earlier about what's happening with the Olympics. Well, that's what's happening. While the Yoshiro Mori, the head of the Olympic games for Japan is saying hell or high water, even with no one watching. They'll hold the Olympics. Yeah, everybody is seeing this, and nobody thinks that it makes sense. 77% of people want it cancelled or postponed. Nobody can see how it's going to work. And this is the thing, even if the government does this monumental effort to get the numbers under control, so that, you know, Japan is in a place that's safe to host it. Well, look at the Australian Open tennis tournament where they invite these players, and it turns out that some of the athletes have it, and they spread it. And imagine expanding that to the scale of the Olympics. I mean, how many athletes come? Like tens of thousands, I think, and they come from every country in the world. Impossible to see how, you know, it's not just up to Japan, it's up to every country in the world to get it under control by July. I don't understand how that's going to happen at all, especially now with these variants coming up now in Brazil, South Africa, UK, and that those are spreading more virulently, that it's worse than it ever was in the US, that the variants are here in Japan. It's just, I like the ambition to have it under control in Japan by then, but even then I don't see how that's going to work. So yeah, most people totally don't understand why we still have to do this. The thing that happened during the middle of this week is that when Tokyo started, Tokyo and surrounding prefectures extended the state of emergency last week that I talked about. Osaka was like, no, we've got this under control. We do things better than Tokyo. And then less than a week after, they were, you know what, we need the state of emergency too. In fact, there was a day this week when Osaka had more cases than Tokyo. So yeah, the area around Nagoya, the area around Osaka, and the area around Fukuoka, as well as Tochigi, just north of Saitama, also asked to join. Basically, they've all got cases now where the R value is now in Tokyo, it's 1.8. All of these are above 1. And they're kind of racing ahead, and it's funny how quickly you get used to hearing about more than 2,000 cases a day in Tokyo and more than 7,000 cases a day in Japan. But that's where we're at. It's kind of getting worse at the moment. I tweeted about this. This was the drama of the Sapporo beer thing. So Sapporo beer, apparently this is what happens when you're a beer company, a Japanese beer company, and you put the person in charge of beer tasting also in charge of checking spelling, that they spell lager, Lagar. Now apparently, correct me, I've been away for a long time, but hey Radri, good to see. Yeah, the way that they spelt lager on beers in New Zealand was Lager, at least as I recall, but apparently Sapporo meant to spell it Lager, which I think for me is still spelling it wrong, but I guess that's the way that they planned to spell it. However, for whatever reason, they actually ran a whole batch of beers with Lagar, and they were so embarrassed when this got caught that they actually recalled all the beer, and everybody on the internet immediately said, we don't care, we want to drink beer, please put it back. Especially if it's going to be cheaper. Like, please don't throw away the beer. The whole nation rose in outrage at the thought that Sapporo might be tossing out beer because of a spelling mistake on the label. So Sapporo came around and decided that, you know what, okay, we took it back from all the Family Mart shelves, but we're going to put it back. Yeah, vote to JJ. About 11,000 athletes at the Olympics, apparently. Thanks for checking that, actually. Well, there you go. I mean, compared to how many 20 or 30 tennis players, Andrea will know how many players there are at the Australian Open, but it's a lot more. It's a lot less than 11,000. Shubus, buenos dias. Good to have the Panama representative there in the chats. So I don't know. I mean, would a beer with Lagar written obscurely on the label, would that stop you just out of grammar outrage from drinking it? I'm pretty sure in New Zealand, given the binge drinking culture, that no one would notice. It was amusing, honestly. I think to me it's like when you have a stamp, that's got a printing error on it. It becomes a collectible, right? But there again, you're not supposed to lick it and put it on an envelope, and which I guess in this case would be not drinking the beer, which would kind of defeat the whole purpose. But I suppose that would increase the value of the preserved cans at the end of it if there are can collectors, which maybe there are not. I don't know. I thought it was kind of cool, but this was a big thing. The people are afraid that all of this beer, good beer, was going to be tossed out. Exactly. So they saved the beer. Spelling and grammar be damned. Lysander 45, excellent to see you. Yeah, good evening. All of these new measures in Japan is having a knock-on effect with paperwork process for your pending visa to Japan. Hopefully still arrive in March, maybe. Indeed. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. But yeah, I've got friends who are planning to come to Japan, migrate to Japan in January, and that's obviously gone down the crapper. The state of emergency is currently only scheduled to run until February 8th, I think. But there again, it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse, so it's really hard to see how that's going to end by February. You might have a fighting chance in March if people start taking the lockdown seriously, but they're not really doing that. So yeah, be prepared to adjust your plans, but remember, good news is I suppose that by March they should be starting to roll out vaccinations in Japan, albeit probably to elderly people and medical care workers first, and that'll be during March. It really won't be until June or July. But yeah, I'm sorry to hear that it's messing with your plans, but I'm hoping that you can make it anyway. Andrew Mumbo, 1,200 players, coaches, entourage, umpires, broadcasters, commentators. Well, that's a good point. Excellent point, actually. Although I suppose if you extend our broadcasters, entourage, coaches, umpires, and so on for the Olympics, then you probably are getting into multiple tens of thousands for that as well. So it would scale similarly. But yes, indeed, that's a big number of people. And they all got in without testing, right? So, yeah. Iraq, 299, good to see you. Nice to see that you made it there. Am I pronouncing it? It sounds kind of German to me whenever I see it there. It might be Rach or Iraq. I'm sticking to Iraq, but 299. Correct me if I'm wrong, but excellent to have you in the comments as always. 350 players in total. Right. So that kind of scale. Plus entourage being about 3 to 4 times that, which is probably conservative actually. And then you think about the people who travel to watch, which I guess they can't in this case. But the Olympics, it's going to include tourists as well. I mean, you include that, it's going to be hundreds of thousands actually. It's insane how even if you eradicated every case of COVID-19 in Japan, how on earth are you going to how are they going to hold a tournament that involves tens of thousands of people who you've got to presume are going to have a pretty high rate of infection, and all the people that are going to be traveling with them and so on? It's crazy. On with the comments. 2 in 3 Japanese back the right to separate surnames for married couples. I still love this picture, which is from the lawsuit that was brought that it was unconstitutional to deny Japanese the right to have separate last names. They pointed out that above the unconstitutionality and the unfairness is white foreigners, Japanese marrying foreigners get to have separate surnames and Japanese don't. And they point out that you can have separate surnames if you divorce and separate surnames if foreigners marry and divorce, but not if Japanese marry, and it's unfair. They lost this constitutional case, but the LDP was considering actually whether they should legislate for this, and the conservative arm of the Japanese LDP, the governing party, decided that they didn't want this. They thought it would undermine the stability of families. However, 2 in 3 Japanese, latest polls, support it. It's interesting. There's no talk about things like hyphenated names and stuff like that. It's more in Japan. The idea is about allowing people to maintain separate names. I must admit that the hyphenated names thing makes some sense. And going through high school in New Zealand, there were always about 10% of the class, I think, were hyphenated name people. Although it did always make me wonder what happens when you have hyphenated name people marrying hyphenated name people, and you start ending up with exponentially growing numbers of names. Although there again, maybe the kids should be able to select whatever name they like. So I see logistical problems with that. Then there's a whole thing about why do you even need surnames? It's kind of a legacy of the need to track and tax people from hundreds of years ago. It's kind of arbitrary, actually. The invention. Surnames for most regular folk, depending on the part of the world that you're from. If you're from UK, I believe that they've been using surnames for hundreds of years. In fact, I think was it a 1066 thing. But if from Eastern Europe, even in the 19th century, it was common for people not to have surnames. In parts of the world today, it's still common to not have surnames. In South Asia and so on. And in West Asia, it's common for people not to have surnames. So, it's a complicated one, but certainly if it's a freedom that 2/3 of people want, it seems silly for the government to fight back against it. I suppose some good news. The cherry blossom forecast is out. 3 days earlier than usual is the forecast, which I think is every year it's been earlier than the average lately. So I think that's a fairly safe assumption. They don't, of course, know what the weather is actually going to be in those weeks of March, but they are predicting a March 23 official beginning of flowering of cherry blossoms. So yeah, if you were in a mad rush to schedule a cherry blossom viewing party or hanami, you'd probably be wanting to aim for around March 30th at the moment, the final week of March, which is the normal weekend to target. Of course, two problems. One, don't schedule a hanami party this year because we're still definitely going to be in a state of emergency as far as I can see, and it would still be obviously irresponsible to having a get-together, even outdoors, a drinking party outside, as dumb as it was last year. The other thing is that you don't know the weather. You don't really know until 2 weeks before if it's actually going to make sense. If you have a sustained cold period, it might not start until April. If you have a warm burst in mid-March, as happens increasingly lately, it might be over by the end of the month. So these are always nice to know, but it's hard to think it's going to have as much impact as usual. It was nice last year just walking around and seeing them in the neighborhood. But it is interesting that Japan invests so much in showing that. Lots of comments from Andrea Mulboy. I won't read all of them, but what about hyphenated surnames like Sally Jones Smith? That's what I was talking about just now, that lots of hyphenated. In fact, I have lots of friends with hyphenated surname friends. And it's pretty increasing. Or of Kiwi land. Yes, I am of Kiwi land. Elrak, I don't understand. Oh, is that a surname? That's a pretty interesting surname. But yes, what else have we got going on? There was an earthquake the other day, which I didn't believe that the epicenter map was accurate, but apparently it was. The way that the plates work is that there are multiple large earthquakes where the epicenter is down there by Mie Prefecture, and all the shaking actually is felt up in Ibaraki and Tohoku and a little bit in Tokyo. So I felt this sort of tremor the other night and was pinging about it, and I thought that the map must be wrong, but no, this is a thing where, because you have the Philippine plate subducts under the Eurasian plate, when the earthquake actually takes place 390 kilometers below ground, it can actually, because it's happening on the plate that's like under the Asian plate, all the wobbling of that plate isn't felt immediately above where the epicenter takes place. It's felt on the plate, which doesn't hit the surface until you get all the way up there to Tokyo and to Tohoku. So this is a thing that happens. You get quakes which are centered vertically way south and far away from Tokyo, but they're not felt because of the angle of the tectonic plate. They're not felt except until you can see where the plate comes up above the surface up there, and that's what we had the other night, and they've had big quakes like that. So that was pretty cool, I kind of thought. Paragoti, excellent to see you. Welcome. This kind of didn't get a lot of news, but it was interesting, especially when you think about, I guess it's nothing like the scale of the, and nothing like the malice and deception of the German Dieselgate, the Volkswagen and Mercedes and I believe BMW. I think all the German makers were involved in Dieselgate. But Toyota's been fined for basically not complying with the EPA emission standards. What they were doing was they were complying with Californian emission standards for cars, which I guess they thought were the most stringent standards in the US, and they were reporting all of their cars as falling under the Californian standard. And the EPA says that no, these Toyota cars were basically misreporting. They were filing under the wrong sort of systems, and they were not reporting correctly compliance with EPA regs. And yeah, they're getting fined 180 million for that. So even Toyota, which is pretty good when it comes to auto emissions, at least by reputation, pretty big fine. And it looks like it wasn't like they were putting defeat devices on the on the cars like the Germans were doing, but at the same time, whether it was through sloppiness and misunderstanding of US laws, which is still unforgivable, or laziness, it's kind of a bad image for Toyota to be failing at this, especially the only car company that has no battery-based EVs. Only has one fuel cell car that can go to like 50 hydrogen stations in Los Angeles and Tokyo and nowhere else. So yeah, it's a bad image for Tokyo, for Toyota, but that's a thing that happened. The government is debating pandemic restrictions, including fines for people that violate quarantines and orders to stay home when they have the virus. It's kind of funny. The government is still debating it. It might surprise you given the strictness of the lockdowns in places like New Zealand and Australia, but even nearby in Asia, like in Taiwan and Korea, where they can arrest people and detain them and, fine people for breaching quarantine and so on. In Japan, there's no powers on that, and it's actually generally considered that the government does not and should not have the power to impose fines for breaching quarantines and for breaching lockdowns. And the government sort of is debating it, how much to fine and penalize businesses and individuals, and they're talking about fines of up to $10,000 and 1 year imprisonment. There's a big debate among politicians as to whether this is even constitutionally possible in Japan. I guess it's part of the legacy of fascism that was a thing for a time in Japan. But it's surprising how hands-off and things like this. They talk about people's freedoms, but there again, NHK survey finds that 86% of people think it's totally fine to impose fines and punish people that don't comply. So there you go, changing times in Japan. This guy, I've been talking about this. So this is the farm minister who took a $50,000 bribe from it looks like a supermarket chain, but I think they're probably also like an agricultural food wholesaler called Akita Foods. He took a bribe to basically stand up in Parliament and I think in an international conference and sort of vote against agreeing global standards for safety and welfare of animals on farms. For whatever reason, these standards just were not to the liking of Akita Foods, and they paid $50,000 to the Minister of Agriculture to get it shot down, which he did. He shot it down. Made up an excuse. And how he got outed on this, I don't know. But the thing is, government ministers in Japan, it really is musical chairs. They don't stay in the role for very long. They're not from the ministry. They're not even usually experts in the ministry. So the people who really decide the policies are the bureaucrats in these ministries. So I suppose when you have a temporary new minister come in and who's overriding everybody's advice to adopt these standards based on a bribe, that's going to get found out in court pretty quickly. That's what's happened. He's either really had heart problems or is faking it, but he is currently in hospital getting medical treatment. In terms of the crash of popularity of the LDP at the moment, right now, this is Suga. His approval rating is 33% and his disapproval rating is now 57%. And you would think it might have something to do with the fact that his Minister of Agriculture has taken a $50,000 bribe to change the law. And in the fact that the government's hardly even reacted to that. And you think that kind of corruption scandal and outrage might be why the Prime Minister is so unpopular at the moment, but it's actually not that. 71% of people say that they don't approve of him because they think that the government's moved too slow on declaring the state of emergency. They've been dragging their feet and not reacting appropriately. That's the reason. So you come back to this. Not only is it the ex-Farm Minister, the ex-Justice Minister is on trial at the moment, criminal trial for corruption, along with his wife, who is also a government politician. Another government politician also currently facing prison for accepting bribes from Chinese gangster-backed casinos or something on the casino legislation and getting casinos approved. So, left, right, and center, people getting indicted and prosecuted for corruption. Abe's own, Cherry Blossom Party, the organization of that, where basically they paid supporters to have a dinner, which constitutes abuse of political funds. Even the former Prime Minister right now, or at least his personal secretary, facing indictment as well. So you've got money in politics, corruption scandals involving this guy, Yoshikawa, two Kawais, Akimoto, Abe. Like, it's hard to even keep track. There's like 5 at the moment. And it's kind of funny. And in spite of all of these corruption scandals around the cabinet of the current Prime Minister, that's actually not the thing that they're getting dinged for. So, yeah, he's just getting slammed for basically not only reacting too slow, and when everyone was saying lockdown, they were still pushing and promoting the need for go-to travel. And remember, I mentioned before a few months ago, go-to travel, the head of the Japan Tourism Association paid $420,000 to the party president of the LDP, a guy called Nikai, who was the most vociferous proponent of promoting the tourism campaign Go To Travel and opposing lockdowns or suspensions of the campaign, and even threatening to take down the Prime Minister if he blocked him from it. And this was out in the public from a tabloid that he collected a $420,000 donation for that. So money and corruption basically driving the government to make appallingly bad public safety decisions. And yet it's not the corruption. It's like people just expect the corruption almost. They're actually just going for the just for the bad handling. And Suga himself also getting criticized for the fact that since he became prime minister, while I think his agenda, his reform agenda has been good as a general policy direction, he's avoided press conferences. He's avoided any kind of explanation, and he's looking terrible. Like his honeymoon is basically over after 3 months already. Then we'll see. He may not have a long life. Normally in the middle of a crisis, you generally hold on to the prime minister. But there again, I mean, Naoto Kan during the nuclear emergency and so on, he didn't last very long either. So we'll see. Lysander 45 asking, I want to know how this scandal is actually fascism, according to Jake Adelstein. Yeah, well, Jake, and some journalists are on the idea that a lot of parachute journalists, people on temporary assignments to Japan wanting a big dramatic story about Japan, have been talking about the whole time I've been in Japan, how Japan is on the brink of a return to militarism and conscription and fascism. And formalizing the flag was seen as a sign that Japan was returning to fascism. Passing a national anthem, something Obuchi did, was declared as that. I mean, everything is sort of declared as that. But certainly the state secrets law was and the ability to suppress certain types of information, that was loudly proclaimed by Jake Adelstein as something that could lead to fascism. Which I suppose it could lead to fascism, but it's also completely, it's actually Japan was doing it in order to receive intelligence being shared from countries like Australia and UK and America and Canada, which of course all of those countries, which may or may not be fascist by these people's standards, already have well-established laws like this. So, people see these all as a slippery slope or whatever. I think Japan has a lot of problems, but the fact that they can't even agree that they have the power to declare a lockdown for a pandemic, I think Japan is a lot further away from the risk of a fascist takeover than a lot of countries that are pointing at Japan and criticizing and suggesting Japan's close to fascism. I think it's a lot further away. It does have problems. And that comes out in these numbers. And just as I say that, another story which might feed into your conspiracy beliefs about tracking of that might feed into your conspiracy beliefs about imminent fascist takeover of Japan. Yes, the government of Japan is definitely looking next month to release a system for tracking foreigners with COVID-19, basically forcing them to adopt. I don't know how this is going to work, actually. And if they're talking about this for residents or just tourists and visitors, it's not clear. And whether they're going to mandate tracking for all people, whether they have COVID or not. It's extremely vague, but yes, they seem to be having this plan of forcing people to carry around GPS trackers so that their movements can be tracked, so that if it turns out that they had COVID-19, they can contact trace, which it's fine, but it's hard to imagine how, and this is one way that I think they're planning to deal with people coming in during the Olympics. But, right now, I mean, people are probably more at risk of catching it in Japan than bringing it into Japan. I have no idea how this is going to work, but there is this plan. I certainly hope I'm not going to be saddled with a tracker as a permanent resident of Japan, but we'll find out. And I think this is the final one that I've got. Someone posted this, a Japanese person talking about what Japan's trying to do. They're basically a dog with very skinny legs trying to balance stopping the spread of COVID-19, keeping everyone working, holding the Olympics as scheduled, and avoiding worldwide criticism. I thought that was actually quite a good graphic there, very accurate. Truth indeed. And that's all the topics that I have. I'm on time. Boom, I am on time. I've been thinking, by the way, it'd be really nice to be able to... I don't have the time to do what I want to do. One, to convert this into an audio podcast, and two, to chop up the sections of this into videos that people could watch as shorter videos during the week, just to make it more accessible. I'd really like to do that. I don't know if does anyone know? I'd be curious if people have know trustworthy and reliable. I would pay a reasonable amount of money if someone could do it like in an efficient couple of hours and charge a fair price for that. I would pay actually just to do that with the show. I would, but there again, it's kind of New Year's resolutions territory. It's something that I know I wouldn't be able to sustain if on my own. I don't have the time, as much as I enjoy doing this. But if anyone has suggestions for a way that I could achieve that, I'd be interested in how I could get that sort of help. It'd be nice to do this year. But those are all the topics that I have. Yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Radri, excellent to have you in the comments and everybody else. Great to see everyone, and have a good week. Stay safe, of course, especially if you're, whether you're in Japan or wherever you are in the world. Wear a mask, stay indoors. Going to be very interesting this week with America. I didn't talk about America at all pretty much this week. It's going to be an interesting week in America. It was an interesting week in America last week. Yeah, try to look away. Think about it like the end of Indiana Jones. It's like when they're opening the Ark. That's going to be America this week, and you kind of tied to the pole, and don't. Yeah, and there were actually a lot of Nazis in that scene, so it's very accurate. Don't look, look away. Look at Japan. Japan is definitely not like that. No face melting ghosts. Have a good week, everybody. Stay safe, and yeah. Have a good week, everybody. Remember, I'll be back here same time, 22:30 JST next week, and see you all later on. Remember to like if you liked. I do appreciate it, and have a good week. Boom, peace. Gonna watch some more Expanse. See you later. Oh, gotta end it over here. Boom. And